The HR Stories podcast is brought to you by the team at HR Stories. The team at HR Stories helps businesses, nonprofits, and HR practitioners better manage the employee experience, providing the tools, training, and resources needed to get HR right. For more information, check out our website at theteam@hrstories.com. Each week on the HR Stories podcast, HR and leadership experts John Thalheimer and Chuck Smikian dive into the stories that matter most to you, our listeners. We have found that there is a lesson in every story. And now our host, John Thalheimer and Chuck Smikian.
All right, John, we're back here with the HR Stories podcast. And I have to tell you, I'm excited because we have people, listeners that are communicating with us now on a fairly frequent basis. Some people have bought our book, The Ultimate Book of HR Checklist, which we are eagerly getting ready to release a new updated edition soon. They're joining the team at one HR group on Facebook. And so I'm just really uplifted by some of the comments I get when people say, I'm a frequent listener and I have a question for you. And I'm like, yay, there are people out there. And actually, I know there's people because we have hundreds of downloads every week. So I know people are out there. But when we hear from them, it's kind of it's like a little Christmas. It's like holiday when I get that email.
Yeah, and there's a little boost to it, right? And there's always that, oh yeah, all right, that's good. And I think just for our listeners' point of view, right? We record these in our own studios and then we send them out and we know we get downloads, right? We get the reports, oh, these many people downloaded and this and this and this. But sometimes we don't know if people are listening, and just having those information come back and say, hey, we've been listening, it's fantastic, or hey, can you talk about this subject, or I have this question. It just really does. It helps us know it's a full circle and that we're just not sending our voices out into the big world of space. Yeah. So I think that's a good thing as well.
It's very exciting. So if this is your first time hearing us, we are the team at HR Stories. The HR Stories podcast is our big outreach. We do a number of other things out there. We always tell stories because there is a lesson
in every story.
Yes, exactly.
Sorry, I'm telling you there.
But we like starting off with HR in the news. And John and I like to tell a tale or a story of something going on in the news that is of interest, I believe, for our listeners. So you got anything for us this morning, John?
I do. I got a couple stories, and it's all going to blend into one of the bigger stories today. And everybody got to watch the YouTube versions, I just want to say. And the first one is, we know that this is kind of blend into both stories, but we know that there are a lot of United States companies asking people to return to work, right? Return to the office, right? We hear that all over. People want to return to the office. But I was reading this one article. So there's these people that want to be remote, and they have decided that is their lifestyle. We want to be remote. And so their companies are saying, well, you need to come into the office 5 days a week, 3 days a week, 2 days a week, whatever. And so these people are like, well, we want to be remote. Well, guess what? Foreign companies are like, we're going to start hiring individuals remotely. And so we're going to reach out to those United States workers that want to be remote and say, hey, do you want to work for our company here in Germany? Do you want to work for our company here in Spain? Do you want to work in Indonesia? And people are now getting jobs so they can remain remote, but their company is in Germany or Spain or Indonesia. And so I find it fascinating. There was a 62% rise in the number of foreign companies hiring U.S. workers as remote workers.
Wow. That's that. Now I got to tell you, you heard it here on the HR Stories podcast, and I read a lot. I see a lot of news articles come across. I've not seen that. And that's fascinating. Really is.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting in terms of I remember probably 15, 20 years ago, we started talking about the global economy and how the world was shrinking and how technology was allowing us to do that. And we really thought a lot about offshoring our work, right? And so having people and foreign companies do the work for us, and it's cheaper and the labor is cheaper. But now it's turning around and foreign companies are going, wow, these people in the United States, we can hire them. They're going to do a great job. And so we can hire
Yeah.
them.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really something. Well,
And then
that's neat.
Yeah. And why I want to give a quote, and I don't remember who it was, but some CEO of I think it was a banking company or that, he said, "This is great. You guys in the United States keep saying you can't do remote. I'd be more than happy to take that talent on."
Yeah.
And so they're looking at it as a competitive advantage, especially because a lot of these companies probably have offices in the United States already,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
so it just makes sense.
Yeah, it's good news for our HR folks. And I got to tell you, the HR job market is really strong. I see all kind of jobs out there. So people are still looking for HR, and they need good HR. And you get good, but you get great by listening to the HR Stories podcast.
Can I ask you a question about that, Chuck?
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of jobs out there, but I also hear people are like, I've been looking for an HR job for a long time and I can't find one. And again, I don't know their criteria, right? So I don't know their salary and that kind of stuff. How important is it for an HR person to be certified either by SHRM or HRCI? How important is it in terms of the hiring process?
I think that's huge. If you're going for a manager or a director or a senior leader position, that's a huge deal. Now, sometimes some folks may not be looking for that, but when they see it, it's like, oh. And sometimes when people, there's a lot of companies that are definitely looking for that. Because I will tell you, having been through this process several times, and then maintaining that certification, which, oh my gosh, my SHRM certification is up in February. I got to load up all my credits. There is there's kind of like it's not like, for example, people say, oh, I went to college. Does that make me smarter? No, but you went to college, you studied, you learned, you made good grades, you learned discipline, you were, that sort of thing. Well, the same thing with the HR certifications, except they're better, I think, than a degree, because you get real world knowledge out of that. So I think they're really important. And I will also tell you, sometimes I get folks that are, oh, I'm a talent management specialist and I do a lot of recruiting, but I just got my HR certification and I'm looking to go into more generalist work. That to me says, oh, okay, someone's kind of shifting in the HR world, but they were so serious, they got their certification and they moved forward. I'll consider that person over maybe someone else.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I definitely think that certification, what the certification does for me, if I'm hiring an HR person, I know they have a certain level of standard, right? I know they have a certain level of knowledge. And now, we do know those individuals, right, that just study for the test. And then the day after the test, they forget it all. That was me. I'm telling you, in college, I studied for the test. And then afterwards, don't ask me about it. But I also had friends in college that were just the opposite and just didn't understand, like, don't worry about your grades. You already know that information. But I do think it's beneficial. I don't think it's always necessary. I'm not going to say you have to get it, but I do think, as Chuck said, the leadership and that kind of stuff becomes good. And one of the things you mentioned, that recertification process, Chuck, our workshops that we do through the team at HR Stories are all certified for recertification credits. So if you are a listener and you're like, oh, I need to get my credits like Chuck, then you can go in there and sign up for our next couple classes that are coming up for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So, John, I know, speaking of HR Stories, we have over the years, we do a variety of story topics, but we've talked about, in fact, one of our very first topics was about facial hair. We called it the tail of the beard. We've done stories on hair and the Crown Act and things like that. And I want to share with our listeners 2 quick stories. The EEOC is cracking down on religious discrimination based on facial hair. And there's a settlement out of Illinois and a settlement out of Virginia. So the first one, the first settlement was in Illinois. This was the EEOC lawsuit. It was Blackwell Security Services. They had an employee. He was a Muslim employee who worked as a concierge, and they basically said, shave or get fired, because after the employee was hired, after he was hired, John, so he went through the whole hiring process. So I just want to emphasize that. He was then told by his supervisor, company policy requires you to be clean shaven. So the employee seeks a religious accommodation, and he was told to shave his beard or be terminated. And to avoid losing his job, he shaved. And so that added what he called in the court case significant distress, and he left the company. And to settle the lawsuit, yeah.
What kind of company was this? I'm sorry, I missed that.
It was the security company. So I guess they were hired again, maybe as a constant. I guess that's their term for security guard. A lot of times you see when you go into a building downtown, Orlando, whatever, you see just a security guard sitting at a desk, right? They're usually security companies. And so they call them, I think, concierge now rather than security guards. So he would, wherever he was working.
I'm surprised that they didn't know better.
Yes. Well, I'm surprised that they hired the guy. They're looking at him. They're obviously interviewing him, and then they tell him after he gets hired. So they had to pay $70,000. They had to provide training to management. They had to report any additional things to the EEOC, any other discrimination. So that was the first one. The next one, though, was a situation in Virginia involving a company called Triple Canopy. It's another religious discrimination situation. And the employee had a Christian belief that men must wear beards, even though he didn't belong to any formal religious denomination. And you and I have talked at times about the spaghetti, the pastafarians.
Yeah, I don't think it's pastafarians, but I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, this is not one of those, but I mean, just about different religious beliefs and things like that. So they required employees to be clean shaven, and they refused the worker's request for a religious accommodation because he was unable to provide substantial substantiation or substantial whatever on his beliefs. They basically said, bring us a note from your religious leader. Yeah, bring me a note from your leader. Right, yeah. And you can't do that. And I know in the past we've said, well, if you can get a note from the rabbi or things like that. But this one here, they said no, and they had to pay $110,000, adopt a new religious accommodation policy. So you just have to be really careful on telling employees to shave, not to shave. Is there a business reason? Things like that. So
yeah, so and I think we talked about that story before on one of our podcasts, or a similar story, I should say, on one of our podcasts, and it's about having that sincerely held belief. If the individual has a sincerely held belief, this as a Christian that men should wear beards, then you have to let them do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And
it's funny you say that. You think we talked about this in previous podcasts, because this one was literally from yesterday. Really? Yeah, or 2 days ago. So, and the other one was from 30 days ago. So,
their stories are out there. I mean, I know we did talk about a similar circumstance.
Oh, sure.
Out there. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah,
but it seems to happen a lot, and just companies need to have those lifelines and keep listening to the HR Stories podcast.
So. Well, and I think it's a reminder, at least to me, and I think because you and I and a lot of our listeners, we follow this stuff, we pay attention to it, we know that it's important. But if you think about a lot of those small businesses or those small corporations, there's so many things to focus on day in and day out that sometimes things get away from us. One of the things that I just want to, where we have a client that we're dealing with this with right now, is you have to train your managers, because a lot of these decisions are not being made by the HR person, right? Because we're dealing with other things. And so they're like, well, I'm just going to do this and blah, blah, blah. And so right. And so we don't hear about it, or it doesn't happen. Right. And so we have to train our managers. It's one of the things that I am so passionate about, that they have to understand the basics of human resources or employment law if they're going to be successful as managers. And it makes HR professionals' jobs harder, for sure. So yeah.
All right. So you got anything else for us this morning before we?
I do, and I'm gonna leave. It's gonna go right into our story. So we'll take a break in a second. But I want to set this up, right? I want to set this up a little bit.
I like it.
And so I was reading the Washington Post the other day, and there was an article. There was an article about research into the mandates of requiring employees to come back in office, right? And so we know, right? We talked about it earlier in the show. There's a lot of companies going, you need to come back in the office. You need to come back in the office. Everyone needs to come, right? And so what the headline said, I'll read the headline verbatim. It says, no, office mandates don't help companies make more money.
Oh.
Right. And so, again, like, we're having CEOs and say, well, we need to do it. We need to be more productive, and we need to do this. And so they did this thing, and they said almost 4 years since coronavirus pandemic sent people to work from home in record numbers, U.S. employers are still struggling to get people back in the office. The power struggle between employees pushing for flexibility, employers trying to reel workers back in, has manifested in employees' workout, corporate threats, and even mass resignations. New research from the Katz, you'll like this one, Chuck, Katz Graduate School of Business at the University of Pittsburgh suggests that the office mandates may not help companies' financial performance, but they can make workers less satisfied with their job and work-life balance. So basically, they're saying you're not making money and you're just dissatisfying your workers.
Yeah.
And so we're going to be talking about, after the break, we're going to be talking about a company that tried to bring people back into the workplace and did it in a way that was probably not the best way. We'll have a little video we're going to show you. We'll play a video. And so I think it'll be a good conversation about remote work and dealing with that in the workplace. And so just kind of addressing that.
All right. That's fantastic. Folks, you've been listening to the HR Stories podcast, where there's a lesson in every story. We'll be back after this short break.
Do you like listening to the HR Stories podcast? Are there times you want to interject or ask a question? Every month, the team at HR Stories invites HR professionals and practitioners to the HR kitchen table to discuss what is happening in HR. In a small group format, up to 12 individuals will share their wisdom, hold each other accountable, and share a few laughs. HR Kitchen Table is free, but you need to register to get your seat. Go to our website at the team at hrstories.com/workshops and sign up now so you can join us. Let's talk HR.
Welcome back from the break, John. I know earlier, before we started broadcasting, you said you wanted to talk to me about something. And so what's the announcement? What's going on?
All right. So I got a big announcement. So I've been thinking about our podcast, and I think that it's going to be better if we're in person together. So starting next week, I need you in Nashville when we record the episode. So I'll see you next week in Nashville.
Sometimes I don't know. Shouldn't we talk about this? Are you serious?
I am completely serious. This is really important. I don't think we're having that right relationship and that right connection. So collaboration will be better if we're in the same room, but don't worry about it. I've asked Sam to be here as well.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I think we need to talk about, should we leave this in? We probably should clip it out. Folks, I'm sorry. Actually, let's start over again, okay? Because you can't be serious.
I know, I'm totally serious. Totally serious. Here, listen. Last month, the CEO of Internet Brands, the owner of WebMD, and many others sent a video out to his employees exclaiming the exact same thing. And so I want to play it to our listeners.
Okay.
And get your thoughts on it. So let me
Oh.
play this. Let me play this video. And I'm not going to play all of it, but I'm going to play maybe, a minute of it. Let me make sure my volume's up so everyone can hear it. Okay, here we go, Chuck. You ready?
Ready.
Many of you have come back to the office, and we've noticed it's made a big difference. Unfortunately, too big of a group hasn't returned. We're getting more serious about getting everyone back into the office for the simple reason that we're better when we're together. We move faster, we get better results, and the executives are going to tell you more about that right now.
We need you ready and present, and we need it now.
Working together face-to-face helps us create ideas faster and better, so we have new products and new offerings for our customers.
We're able to collaborate and help each other to be better leaders.
We all know when we spend more time together, we end up creating better solutions for our clients.
It encourages organic breakthrough moments of creativity, specifically across teams who haven't worked together in person as much before.
It propels us into meeting our business goals, and we definitely have big goals for 2024, and we need your help to accomplish those.
We're better when we're together, and we need to be our best to crush our competition.
We have been slow in getting back with some people and in some places. That's about to change.
Your manager will be in touch with you shortly about how this will be implemented and tracked.
Thank you, team. I want to leave you with this. We aren't asking or negotiating at this point. We're informing of how we need to work together going forward. It's, again, for the simple reason that great companies are built by great people working together and seeing each other eye to eye and tackling the big task. Thank you in advance for your help.
And so that's pretty much the whole video there, Chuck. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I guess we're not going to edit out that first part. So you were spoofing me. I get it.
I was spoofing you. You can relax now, Chuck. I was just setting you up because I wanted you to feel what that felt like. And so how did it feel to you to be told that you were coming back into the office?
Yeah, well, right on the spot and said, no, it didn't feel good. Well, we collaborate, you and I, and we collaborate on a lot of things. So for you to come out and say that, it was like, okay, this is really like all of a sudden you're on your defensive, what's going on here? And with this video, I'd have to say, I think the general idea of trying to make it appealing and say, hey, we're look, in the office and we really want you back and we'd love you. I get the general idea. They're trying to market it in a way, but then it dovetails into this thing that says, we will be in touch with you to talk to you how we're tracking this and how we're whatever. And then it says, at this point, we are not asking, we are informing, and it was like, you will comply someday. But right now we're just letting you know, it was like, it sounded like something Dr. Evil might say,
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, and it was very abrupt and interesting. You can't see the video. I mean, obviously at the end of our listeners can't see the video. At the end of the video, it comes up to like a video call and it says, are you looking for everybody? They're all in the office, right? And so it's crazy to think that you would send that message out and not get backlash, right? And not get backlash. And one of those speakers there was the vice president of human resources.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in defense of the company, right? In defense of the company, right? And so it's Internet Brands is the name of the company.
Okay.
And so, right. So you would think technology and that kind of stuff and communicating through technology and WebMD is all based on, getting information there as well. You would think they would be a little more there. So in defense of them, they're keeping their hybrid policies, but they're trying to get people back in the office because they feel it'll be beneficial for the company.
Yeah. Well, I get it. I get it. And, you know, as an HR person, I understand organizations have to do what's best for their company. But also as an HR person, it just seems kind of a weird way to encourage us to come back to the office.
Oh, I totally agree. That would totally turn me off.
Yeah.
I would be like, are you kidding me? And they show this person in the video working on his home, and he's sitting in his boxers, and he has his suit top on top, right? And he has food spread out. Like, you're really unprofessional if you work from home, right? And just the messaging was a miss. To me, I agree with you that the idea was well, the messaging, the execution of it, I think came really off.
Yeah, you know, it reminds me of a Saturday Night Live spoof skit that could, and it could easily be ridiculed by everyone watching that, you know, joking and creating all kind of like quick little memes and sayings. And so, yeah, they probably didn't take it seriously, but I just wonder if anyone out there is doing it right, because it's such a difficult thing to, you know, people are still kind of working through this part now. Have you heard of anyone doing it right?
And I think that's a good question. But before I'm going to answer it, because I do think there's a great example, let's talk about the different work environments, right? So first, there's work at work, right? Where the individual does their job in the workplace where it needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of jobs that have to be done at work, right? So for example, in the hospitality industry, as you know, I'm saying 95% of that workforce has to be doing their job. You can't have somebody not doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're right. And as you know, I'm working as a temporary HR director for a few months here in the Florida Keys and at a large resort. And there's really only a handful of jobs that could be done remotely. Obviously, bellman could not, bell person, sorry, the cooks, the culinary, the servers, although maybe someday there will be AI servers that can run the food out. I don't know. I've seen that in, you know, little snippets here and there, but pretty much we're here working.
Right. Yeah. Right. And so I can't imagine a bartender working from home, at least not yet. Right.
Right.
The second is, right. So that's the one, right. So we have the work at work. And then the second one is remote or virtual work, where the employees work via technology anywhere in the world, typically at one's home or house. In fact, Chuck, I did this, I think you know this because I think we talked about it this week, but I did a workshop around managing virtual workers, right?
Yes.
And it's actually a workshop that you had designed and built and created. So cool. I love being able to do your work, help extend your work, I guess I should say. Right. And so we see that, right? We see that out there, and there's a lot of questions and how do we do it and that kind of stuff. And so typically we're seeing that in the financial, consulting, training. We know we do a lot more hybrid training now, and then technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, you know, I guess when you look at jobs and looking back on it, I'm just wondering, have you ever had a job where it could have been 100% remote?
I've been thinking about that, right? Because I go back and I look at all the jobs that I've had, and some of them I could do portions of it at home, right? I could do portions of it at home. And maybe I think there was one that I could probably do about 90% of it, right? I could do 90% of it. But typically, I had individuals or people or teams that were working in the office or in the workplace, right? So sometimes it was manufacturing, sometimes it was retail, sometimes it was something else. So I don't think it's fair for me to say I didn't think in the time that it was fair for me to be working at home, have that privilege of working at home, and then come into the office every now and then, right? And so kind of wanted to kind of break that through and do that as well. When we're looking at this and doing this, I think it becomes really important to think about that remote work and what is the best thing, right? And so we have remote work, we have virtual remote work, and then we have people working there. And so now there's this model of hybridness, right? And so I think that third status called hybrid, which is a combination of the two, I think more and more companies are doing that type of thing. And so to me, that seems to be the best business model. And it's the model that's going to continue to go forward because it's that balance between helping the employee and helping the organization in there. So I think that's going to happen there for sure.
So, for instance, hybrid is like you work at home on Tuesday and Thursday, and then you work in the office on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, are they working? Hybrid policies working? What say you?
Yeah, as I said earlier, they're definitely working, and I think more and more organizations are going that. They're really interesting because there are many different strategies to hybrid, right? As you mentioned, right? So it could be, all right, we need everybody in on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Everyone can work from home on Tuesday or Wednesday, right? Or they're going, all right, the first week of the month, everyone needs to be in. Second, everyone can work from home. Third, there. And some are like, well, you need to be in when we're having meetings or when we're doing something over here, right? And so it kind of different ways there.
Mm-hmm. So is one company found maybe the right solution? Is anyone out there like crack the code?
Crack the code. Yeah, honestly, I don't think there's going to be one solution, right? And I think you're going to have to look at this and really think about your culture, your organizational culture, how your business is run. And it may be different for different departments, right? And so there may be like, okay, well, this department, you guys can all work at home. This department, you have to be hybrid. This department, you need to be on there. But you have to think about that culturally and what that says to your organization, really kind of break that down and look at it. So my favorite so far is the JM Schmucker company.
Oh, yes.
JM Smuckers, right? Smuckers. They make the jams, the jellies, and they do a lot of stuff like that. And so what they did is they decided, we're going to be strategic about this. When does it matter for employees to be in the office together? When does it matter for them, everyone to be in the office together? And so they created a calendar of 22, I think it's 22 core weeks that employees need to be in the office during that period. And
Gotcha.
I think that does a lot, right? Because if I know everyone's going to be in that office at that same time, then it'll make it easier for me to come in and I get to connect and I can collaborate. We can be creative and I can set up meetings. Okay, I know I'll meet with that person then, right? And so we can kind of build some of that up.
Yeah, I like that core weeks thing. So, yeah, I agree with that. My research, as I've looked at a few things here, and as you're talking, I can see here 9 out of 10 remote capable employees prefer some remote work with flexibility, with the majority preferring hybrid work. And on average, employees prefer to be in the office 2 to 3 days a week. And the schedule tends to optimize something that they're calling employee engagement.
Yeah, that's great. And where did you get that information from? Just for
so Gallup, which I love the Gallup polls. And they did a poll last year. They looked at the numbers. One thing I found interesting in the survey was the engagement changed based on who decided on the hybrid work schedule, John. Who decided? Can you guess which method employees preferred?
When they decided themselves, of course.
Absolutely. Isn't that amazing, right? The high was at 41% engagement, but the highest engagement rating came when the team and the work team decided together, and that took the engagement to 46%.
That's interesting, right? So what you're saying there is that the employees were more engaged when the team decided together how they're scheduling and how the hybrid scheduling was going to work, right? Because that talks to control, it talks to ownership, it talks to accountability, which we know are motivating factors for employee engagement.
I think internet branding, that was the name of the company,
yeah, internet
branding didn't do a great job of branding this whole situation. And they pretty much maybe did a lousy job rolling it out. I don't know, what would be a better way?
Yeah, and I mean, right, and I think, again, the concept of it and trying to get people on board and try to tell them why, but showing empty offices and having senior management tell them, this is not a debate, this is not a discussion, we're informing you. They were probably worried about something, so probably not the best way, right? So first of all, we have to start understanding why you want a hybrid policy, right? What are your organizational goals, right? Do you want to increase collaboration across the workforce? Do you want to increase productivity? Do you want to make sure that there's connections and people have a chance to move up, right? And so kind of looking at all of those things, I think. And then, right, if so, how is this going to be reflected in your policy, right? And so if I want to increase collaboration, is this the only way I can increase collaboration, right? The only way I can, right? And so a lot of times I think companies are making the decision because, well, we know it worked before the pandemic, so we're just going to do that before. It's interesting, Chuck, and let me go off a little bit here. So when I was doing your class, the virtual managing employee class, right, when I was facilitating that, I asked them, why did they decide to do remote work, right? Every single one of them across the two classes that I did said it was because of the pandemic, right? They were forced into it, but it was working so well, they decided to keep it, right? And so I think, again, they were not making that decision. But if we're going to make that conscious decision to bring people back into the office, whether it's hybrid or whether it's full time, we need to know what our expectations are, right? And we need to be able to set those metrics off. One of my friends is required to go to work 3 days, right? He has to go in the office 3 days so they can collaborate better. But he tells me all the time, I went to the office today, I was the only one in there, right? And so that's not, right? That's like, who am I collaborating with, right? He's collaborating with people at home, right? And so, again, that's when you have to think through your pot. If you want collaboration, that means everyone needs to be in the office at the same time.
Right. Then you got on a Zoom call.
Yeah. So the second thing is to take the temperature of your employee base, right? And so we love to think in the leadership roles and, right, we're above that. We don't need to think about it, but they're going to make that decision for you. If you say, hey, you need to come back in the office and you force them in, I can guarantee productivity is going down, right?
Yeah.
So send a survey out asking them, we're looking to increase collaboration across the team so that we can increase organizational productivity. One concept that we're looking at is hybrid work. What do you think about hybrid work? How do you think that will increase collaboration? Ask them their opinions, and you may come up with some great ideas that, as a business leader that's been doing business the same way for 30 years, you may not think of. And then how many days, right? Ask them the details, really kind of get in there. And if the answer is 0, right, they don't have any ideas, ask them what other options should the organization start to do to cross-team collaboration, right? Kind of get in there and then do a mix and say, hey, based on your feedback, this is what we've decided. For the next 6 months, we're going to do 2 days a week in the office, and we're going to see if that increases productivity, increases collaboration. We're going to follow the metrics. And if it does, great, we're going to stay there. If it doesn't, we're going to look at other options and try to come up with that.
Yeah, I like that. Giving employees a say in how the hybrid policy is created.
Yeah, and you could ask them again, what are the challenge they would face if we required them to be off in the office more often, right?
Again, giving them input.
Right, and so going through that, I think, is a really important thing because there may be things you're not thinking about, right? Oh, well, the cost of parking has gone up by $50 a day, or, right? And so going through that and kind of look at that. And so now, once you've listened to your employees, and again, we're not going to be like, oh, we're not going to be held hostage by our employees, but we need to look at that, right? And so now we've created awareness, right? We need to increase awareness to them. And then we need to come up with that communication plan, right? We need to let them know, oh, by the way, based on our conversations that we've been having about hybrid work model, and then that's where that video would have been great, right? We've already had the conversations. So, hey, based on that, here's why we're doing it. Here's what people are saying. Here's what your coworkers are saying. I'm going to be much more, oh, all right. Oh, yeah, so-and-so. I would like to see that person again, right? And so kind of doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. So it seems like a lot of effort and it really shouldn't be rushed into. Seems simple though, but like you said, don't rush into it.
Yeah, it's simple on its face, right? It seems simple on its face, but it does take a lot of effort. But if you do it well, you can minimize employee backlash, right? And so if you do that,
and I want to remind
you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm just so excited because I'm thinking about our book, right?
Right.
And our book, the ultimate guide to HR checklists. We have a remote employee section. I think there's 1 or 2 checklists involved in that to help remote employment and get it right. And it's available on our website, team@hrstories.com /HR help, or you go to hrchecklists.com and you can check out the book. But John, I know we have a second story.
Yeah, and this one is about when real life imitates art.
All right. Well, you've been listening to the HR Stories podcast, where there's a lesson in every story. And when we come back, John is going to tell another story where the plot of a movie becomes all too real.
Hi, it's me, John, from the team at HR Stories. We are often asked, how do I get better at HR? The simple answer is by practicing it. But as with most things in life, it isn't that easy. We make the best HR decisions when we have the knowledge, the systems, and guidance in place. Chuck and I founded the team at HR Stories to help HR practitioners get HR right. We are passionate about giving you the tools to excel at your job. For more information about upcoming workshops, resources, and our latest blogs, check out our website at theteam@hrstories.com. Together, we are the team at HR Stories.
Welcome back to the HR Stories podcast, where there is a lesson in every story. And during the break, John and I were talking about our upcoming workshops on HR compliance and our workshops coming up on leadership, 2 different tracks of workshop. And if you haven't, check them out. Please, you can find them on our website. They're a great way to continue to learn and to get HR certification credits for SHRM.
Yeah, I love our on-demand courses, and they're so popular. And people go in there and check them out and listen to them. And some of them, we got to, there's cost to some of them, but some of them are free. So go ahead and check that out. Go to our website, the team at hrstories.com, and you'll see them there.
Yeah, agreed. Now back to the show, or back to the movies.
Back to the movies. All right. So you remember the movie, Chuck, The Trouble with the Curve, starring Clint Eastwood, Amy Adams, Justin Timberlake?
No, I don't. I don't.
Right. All right. Well, so this is a movie, right? This is a movie about an aging baseball scout played by Clint Eastwood.
Okay.
Who was being pushed out of his job, right? There was younger people and they're like, we can do this better. You don't get the right talent, blah, blah, blah. I have statistics and I can do analyticals and that kind of stuff. And so his daughter, played by Amy Adams, joins him on his last, what he perceives to be his last scouting mission. And so he goes to high schools and colleges to see whether they have good pitchers. So they're looking for pitchers and players. And so that's kind of the story. And he talks about in this story about listening to the pitch, right? And really listening to the ball as it crossed the plates, as it hits the catcher's glove, and there's a sound that you can hear it. And so near the end, so he's on this scouting mission, and at the end of the scouting mission, they're both he leaves, right? He gets frustrated, and Clint Eastwood takes off, and so Amy Adams and her character is in the motel, and so they're closing up the motel, and she's in the motel, and she's talking to somebody on the phone, and she hears this, and she goes out there, she goes out of her room, and she sees this young gentleman throwing a baseball to his brother, I think. And it's funny part of the movie is, so you see the brother, and the brother has a catcher mitt on and a glove on because these balls are being thrown so hard. And so they end up taking this person to the big leagues, to the main thing to see if he's going to be it, right? And so again, the trouble with the curve. I don't want to ruin the movie, but
no, but I love that. I'm gonna have to look that up. I mean, I know there are some real baseball aficionados here that will completely understand what you're talking about, and yeah, that's great. So tell me, how does that become an HR story? That's a great movie.
Well, right. So it's a very heartfelt movie, and the good guy wins in the end, right?
Yeah.
Recently, this past year, a similar scenario played out in the Major Baseball League, right? In the Major Baseball League.
Oh,
in a class action lawsuit, 18 scouts alleged that the Major League Baseball discriminated against them by firing them in favor of substantially younger scouts.
Wow. I love going to spring training, and one of my favorite things to do when you're looking at spring training, it's a lot happening. A lot people just think it's pitch, bat, catch. There's so much happening on the field, and my brother-in-law Ron, he's pointed things out. One of my favorite things is to watch the scouts behind home plate at every spring training game. They're really into it. They got their radar guns on, and they're writing notes and things like that. So, folks, getting away from the baseball, but still staying with baseball because it's part of the story. Age Discrimination Employment Act, the ADEA, says that anyone at the age of 40 and over cannot be discriminated against based on their age.
Right. And so the class action lawsuit, right, said that the MLB defendants denied job opportunities for the individuals and therefore allegedly violated the ADEA. And in fact, continued to violate it. So this case involves a lot of inside baseball, as it were. But I think that the most thing that stood out to me was the plaintiffs put forth a list of senior scouts that the Major League Baseball club used a refuse to rehire list. So they had a list.
Yeah, you gotta love that. So you're telling me that there was a list of scouts that clubs refused to hire.
Yeah, they had a list. They literally had a list that said these individuals were restricted from applying new scouting jobs upon non-renewal or other termination of employment.
All right, well, drop the mic. That's kind of a smoking gun.
Yeah, it's interesting because the scouts were saying that the clubs were acting as if they were joint employers, right? Which is a big topic right now with the NLRB coming out with some joint employment thing. And so we have to be careful of that, meaning that they were working together to make employment decisions around these scouts. And so according to the scouts, they use COVID-19 as a pretext to let older scouts go. They basically said that the scouts were being let go because of the pandemic and were not eligible for rehire.
Yeah, so it makes sense that during COVID-19, less scouts would be needed as baseball pretty much at all levels stopped operating, but then to keep mostly senior scouts from not being hired back, you know.
That's the challenge, right? Yeah. So if I may use another baseball movie reference here. We're going to a little baseball movie reference here. But the movie Moneyball, do you remember that movie?
Yes.
So I think Brad Pitt starred in it, and somebody else starred in it. But so in the concept in that movie was, if we start using the right analyticals, we can hire people at a lower rate, and we can get better players, and we can do that, right? And so they really went through and they started using analyticals, and so that became, and because it's a real life, Moneyball is a real life story. That became part of the game, right? And so they started using much more analytics, and that helped the teams wins. And so it became a reality in scouting. They emphasized it a lot more. And so when they were thinking about hiring somebody, they needed somebody that had a higher understanding of analyticals and being able to watch videos back in the office versus going out and watching these people in there. And so when the older scouts were let go, one of the reasons they were told they weren't rehired because the clubs didn't feel that they had necessary skills to meet the demands of the new scouting.
Yeah, and it sounds like they just blanket across the board said this age and older can't handle it anyways, and I'm assuming they weren't willing to train them.
Yeah, so the scouts argued that statistics had been used by scouts since the early 1900s to make sure they were finding the best players, right? So they were like, we've been doing this all along, but we just do it more intuition based, just based on our 20 years of experience and what needs is to be there.
Yeah, no, that's really something, and it's interesting too. So where does the case stand now? What's going on?
So as far as I know, it hasn't gone to trial, right? And the plaintiffs are asking for a jury trial, right? They want the jury on their side and see these people being mistreated and all that kind of stuff. So my assumption is that it will probably be settled out of court, but I don't know that for sure.
Yeah, especially since if it would hurt the brand, the Major League Baseball brand. So what's the lesson here for our listeners?
I think we should watch baseball movies. Is really what I think.
Yeah.
I think to sum this all up, Chuck, I think we need to be in person so we can watch baseball movies together. Now, so the lesson for me is when we're thinking about trying to lower the age of our employee base, or increase the generational diversity in the workplace, we need to be very careful about how we do that. There are a lot of protections out there, especially in this case for people that are over 40. And so we need to be really careful about doing that. There are some reasons to bring in younger people into the workforce, but you don't want to do it at the expense of firing people because they're old.
Yeah. And if someone, if someone doesn't have the skills or the technical skills or whatever, and you've tried and you've shown what they call good faith effort and you need to move on from them, that's fine. But to just draw a line, an arbitrary line at an age or even a race or religion or something, that's where companies get into trouble. They assume, and therefore they, get sued, shall we say.
Oh, that's good. I like that. Yeah, sued. Yeah. That's great. That's fantastic. So any final words, Chuck, before we sign off for today?
No, I think that was it, is you cannot just draw an arbitrary line based on age, and you need to also show some good faith effort to say, okay, we gave these folks a chance, and we looked at it. We looked at training. We looked at coaching, and you go from there. You just can't draw that arbitrary line. What about you, John? Anything?
Yeah, I mean, I would add to that because it couldn't be an arbitrary line, but I think when you're thinking about layoffs, you're thinking about moving or rehiring a group of people that you laid off. Be careful about when you make the decision, all right, we're going to lay off these people, we're going to bring back these people. What are the statuses? What are the protected classes that, does it seem like, oh, we laid off only the people that were over 40. That's going to get your company. Or we only laid off the Christians part of it, right? That's going to get that's an example, but you've got to be careful with that. And so I would say that that's how I would end it up. And I would also say, Chuck, that I think we collaborated really well. And so I don't think we need to bring you back to the Nashville office. No, I think it's okay for you to stay down in the Florida office. I think that'll be fine. So Sam, all right for you to stay in your office as well. I know that was very concerning. I wanted to make sure we left this in good terms.
A hybrid trip to Nashville would not be bad, and maybe a hybrid trip for you to Florida would be okay. Folks, you've been listening to the HR Stories podcast, where there's a lesson in every story. Stay tuned. Next week is our Q&A segment, which we always love doing, where we take questions from our listeners.
You've been listening to the HR Stories podcast, where there is a lesson in every story. Thank you for listening to the HR Stories podcast. The material presented in this podcast is for informational purposes only. Chuck and John always recommend using an employment lawyer or HR consultant to handle any legal concerns or HR issues. We do our best to double check sources and make sure the information we are providing is accurate. We may eliminate or embellish without changing the basic narrative to make the story easier to understand. In certain circumstances, we may change identifying information to protect the innocent. The HR Stories broadcast is brought to you by the team at HR Stories. The team at HR Stories is designed to help anyone with HR responsibilities be better at managing the employee experience. To engage with us, go to the hrstoriesteam.com and learn more about how the team at HR Stories can support your business or nonprofit. Thank you for listening to the HR Stories podcast, where there is a lesson in every story.